For many unauthorized immigrants and many families, there's actually quite a number of families that have a mixed composition with regards to their status and with regards to how many children there are. There are about 16.6 million people in unauthorized immigrant families nationwide. And when we talk about the characteristics of unauthorized immigrant parents and unauthorized immigrant adults, you notice that one of the characteristics you usually think of when we talk about unauthorized immigrants is that they're mostly male and they don't have children. Yet, when we take a look at the statistics, what we find is this. Among the men, there are actually more who are either married, have a partner, or living with somebody as a partner, or they themselves have children, more so than those who are single and living without a partner and living without children. Among the women, we see a much starker difference. Most unauthorized immigrant women are themselves partnered to somebody or have children. Now, I want to give you some sense of public opinion because we've talked about some facts. One of the other things we do at the center is we do a lot of public opinion polling. We asked Hispanics about the top issues that they saw were of most importance to them personally in the last election. And here's what we found. We found that education was actually the top issue for Hispanics, followed by jobs and healthcare. And by the way, this is just among registered voters, but the numbers are the same whether we talk about registered voters or all Latinos, even among foreign-born Hispanics, a very similar pattern. You'll notice that immigration, however, is fifth on this list, behind the federal budget deficit at 31%. 31% saying it was extremely important to them. Now, that doesn't mean that immigration is not important. It's an important issue for many Hispanics, but not every Hispanic is an immigrant, and a lot of Hispanics, when we ask them, don't necessarily put immigration as a top issue. They put education, healthcare, or jobs as top issues. Nonetheless, a significant share of Hispanics, about a third of Hispanic registered voters, say that the issue of immigration is extremely important to them. So for many Hispanics, it's a very important issue. I want to close by sharing some data. This is the closest that we have come to asking specifically about the DREAM Act. We have not specifically asked about the DREAM Act on any of our public opinion polling, and there's some polling on the DREAM Act, but frankly, the questions are not very well crafted. But what we have done here is we have done a question asking about support for in-state tuition for unauthorized immigrant students. And you'll see that among Latinos, 78% say that if an unauthorized immigrant student graduates from a public high school in their state, they support the idea that that student should actually receive in-state tuition costs at the local public institutions if they've graduated from high school. And you can see that the numbers are pretty much the same across the board, with some of the strongest support among those who are naturalized immigrants themselves. Okay, thank you very much, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the honor of being with you. What a delight, and be with these panelists and all of you. To dream for a better future has always been part of the core of the experience of this nation. I believe it was John Hyam, an American intellectual historian, who said that you could look at the history of immigration in the United States, and it could be distinguished by those people who had lost the dream and were trying to exclude those who still had the dream of making the world a better place. And so when we ask tonight about, is it illegal to dream, maybe it's important to talk about, can we dream again about that world that we want to create, that God has called us to create in this wonderful nation, and the potential we have and how we look at immigration. So is it illegal to dream for our youth and our families? Or can we together build a new coalition to dream better? I should also give the caveat that although I am a lawyer, I'm not giving legal advice tonight. And if you ask specific questions, I probably can't answer your immigration question, but I can refer you to Professor Kerment. But I do want to give one big context before I get into the substance. I've been asked to talk a little bit about what the law is, why are there so many issues with where we're at. And some of you may know I used to practice law with Professor Kerment, and there was a big difference when I worked at that law firm with him. Corporate clients had relatively big budgets that they wanted to pursue their legal aims, and they'd hire him to come in and fight the good fight with integrity, but with aggressive, good, creative lawyering. And they would go as far as they had to go to win their case, and often the law permitted them with good attorneys to do that. When I left that to practice immigration law, I found a whole different kind of practice. Our clients often didn't speak English. They didn't know the legal system, perhaps. They might have signed papers that they didn't know. Maybe an elementary child in their family was the translator who was neither proficient in English or their native language. And yet those documents may be used against them because they signed it, even though they weren't sure what they signed. Some had no remedies. And as a lawyer, that's one of the hardest things, to meet with your client, spend some time, and then after all your creativity, even if you were Professor Kermit, not be able to find a solution, and to tell that person that you cannot help them. I also worked with hundreds of refugees, often suffering post-traumatic stress or the violence of persecution and torture. And because the system put them in the proceedings to deport them, they couldn't say, excuse me, can I have a timeout to get well, to get healthy, so I can testify on myself? And then we put them in a courtroom and put them up there on a witness stand and ask them questions, just like the torturer might have done in their prison cell in El Salvador or Guatemala. And I, as a lawyer, was part of that, and I wear my suit, and I'm asking questions. Was I as guilty? How does that do that as a lawyer? So to think about the American legal system, which some people have talked about as the old jousting of knights back and forth, fighting each other, and to put immigrants into that system, and asylees even more difficult. So think of that context when people say, oh, there is a law. It's a little bit different when we work with this system. So that's the big context. So my goal tonight in the short time is to give you what I would take a full semester of teaching immigration law, to give you a broad overview, and what I said, the not so good news, why it's not as helpful today, what a tragedy it was to not pass the DREAM Act. Mark, I do take positions, so you'll hear some of that too. And I welcome your questions and critiques if you think that I'm misstating in the questions and answers afterwards. So people tell me, let's see if I go to my first. There we go. Can you see that? I made a brick wall. As a lawyer, I need kind of pictures in my head. These are many of the remedies that are, quote, on the books for immigration law. I'll get through some of them, but for me, it's like I tell my clients, if we can build a brick wall, if I can find the right remedy, maybe you could stay here in that sense. But it really is, in many ways, a fantasy, because although these all have the name of remedies, immigration, asylum, the like, as I hope in the short time I have, you'll see a lot of these are not available to a lot of people. So basically, how does our immigration system work? Well, first of all, think for 1 second. Think you're one of the first colonists coming to the United States. Right? If you had to make immigration law, what would it be? Dream a little bit. What would be a fair system? A lottery? Before you come, put your name in a hat and they pick the first 100 out? Would that be fair? Do we need more nurses and doctors, so if you have a nursing degree, you get to come in? Do we need more ministers? Women religious? I'll vote for them. But think about it. The Commonwealth countries have a point system, kind of like some colleges. They decide what is important. So we'd like young, healthy workers. Right? Educated, you have a PhD, you get more points than you get if you have a high school diploma. Put all the numbers in, and if you get over 150 points, you get in. Might be fair. Think about it. Then we have to decide what is the fair way, right? What do we need in this nation? What do we need more of? So think about that, because sometimes we get stuck in what we have, right? And then we fight over the crumbs of that sort of thing. But as I tell you the overview, so what do we do? We've decided kind of 3 main areas for immigration law in this country: family reunification, business, refugees. We've decided that family reunification is the most important. By the way, Mark gave a lot of numbers. I'll be a professor and ask a quiz here. How many people lawfully come into the country each year through our immigration system? Pardon?